Well, welcome to the Experiences series. This is number 7, Spiritual Experiences number 7. I'm only doing these videos of the main ones that have so far occurred to me as, what would you call them, correlations and witnesses and testimonial experiences to the enlightenment of my mind and the truth of the worldly situation, in that there is no world, and the coming to know that and the coming to integrate that as a way of seeing and decision making as taught through the principles of A Course in Miracles, or you could be taught through the Bhagavad Gita or the New Testament of the Bible or the Quran or whatever you want to. All spiritual paths lead to one source. There is only one God. I should add, if you are a student of A Course in Miracles, you would be familiar with the idea of holy instants and miracles, and all of the things that go along with doing the workbook, seeing things with light around them and having things appear and disappear and all that sort of stuff. And I would call those general across the board kind of things that go on. But the ones that I'm making in this series about, or the ones I'm making this series about, are the more personal ones that I think and it seems reasonable to me to be able to say that have been birthed from the revelation that I received and was given. This particular one, if you've been following along, you'll be aware that after my enlightenment, after the illumination of my mind, after the experience that happened, the non-temporal experience wherein I found myself as just mind in mind, one with all things, and then finding myself back in the world about half an hour after that experience. I was attending after that, about a year after that, I attended full-time the healing centre where that experience occurred to me without any kind of a prompt. But I attended about a year after that. I was told if I didn't come and study full-time and commit myself to the transformational process that would align me and allow me to ground that experience, that I would actually waste that experience. And I was very grateful for Greta at that time for making it obvious to me that I had one chance. And of course, I began my attendance at the Healing Centre full-time after that. You can call it a monastery or a temple or whatever you want to call it, a church, doesn't matter. But I was there for 6 years after that moment with Greta, studying and meditating and praying and doing everything that you would normally do at a place like that. So at about probably 2 years into the transformational process, using the curriculum of A Course in Miracles and being involved with the daily life of what went on at the Healing Centre, I was extremely aware that apart from the immediacy of the guidance that I'd received to be there and to undergo the experience of illumination, that there were in fact other minds, other beings, other influences in my transformational experience that were not of the world, that were apparent to me both energetically and physically, I guess, in a sense where I became kind of sixth sense, if you want to look at it that way, sixth sense attuned, I don't have another way to put it, just sort of attuned to these subtle frequencies that, like that, that made me become aware of a presence. And if some people say they feel like there's a ghost or a chill in the room when they walk into a haunted house or something like that. It wasn't quite like that, but I was just aware that I was being watched, being monitored, I don't know. But I remember one night, actually it was one day, went into the night, but one day I sort of spontaneously decided after the morning prayer and meditation, which would normally go till well after lunch, about 12:30, 1:30, 2 o'clock-ish, that I would go into the session room, the big meditation room that we had there at the centre, which I knew would probably be empty for at least 3 or 4 hours until the evening Vespers began. There were no other classes or anything, readings or anything booked in for that day. So I went into the session room at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and without really knowing why, as seems to be the case with all of these things, I began a kind of a self-imagined, self-assumed, I don't know how to talk about it. I don't know that I felt guided to do anything particularly, but I just set up a circle of 12 chairs. There was about 100 chairs in that room. But I picked 12 chairs and put them in a circle and put a cushion on each chair and sat in the middle of that circle. And I offered a prayer of invitation, I guess, to whoever it was, whomever they was, whatever, to make themselves known to me. I wasn't afraid. And I don't know why it looked like 12 circles. It's just, I don't know why it looked like that. It just, everything in my life and in my experience seems to point to circles and, the circle of atonement. But anyway, so I sat there for a little minute, and one of the other brothers walked through. There was a door at each end of the room. One of the other brothers walked through, and she, we called everybody brother in there, as in Brotherhood of Christ, but Annette, and she walked through and she just looked at me sitting there in the middle of the circle, and I don't know what she thought I was doing, but she said to me, "This is not what this place is about." And she walked off in a kind of a huff out the other door and off to her room, off to her cabin. And I just ignored her. I just thought, no, this is what this place is about. Trying to get in touch with the higher self, and whatever that's going to look like, it looks like. It doesn't have to look like a specific kind of format of things. It can be anything. So anyway, I sat there for a little while and did my thing till it felt like it was done, and inviting in whoever it was to make themselves known to me. And then I put the chairs back and put the cushions back, and went about whatever I did for the rest of the day. I went to Vespers in the evening, which I think it was a video, perhaps, I think, a healing video, which we would quite often watch, usually on meditation or something. Oh, pardon me. And then I went off to my cabin. I was sharing a cabin with somebody. There was like a 2-room, these prefab things that we had on the block there. There was about 8 or 9 of those. Anyway, and I had a little 12-volt television. It was tiny, like a really tiny little thing, and I had it set up on a sort of bedstand beside my bed. And I would often watch something or other before drifting off, just to sort of let my mind go, just watch some kind of boring human-oriented sitcom or something, just to often allow my mind to just flop out, or drop out of all the spiritual stuff that I've been doing during the day, because it was always quite hectic. Like it was, the pressure was always on. It was always, you could feel it building till you couldn't take any more. Like so much prayer, so much meditation, so much study. It's like, you just need to defrag. And anyway, I was watching whatever it was on the thing, and the television was within arm's reach. I could turn it off and on by pushing the little button and pulling the little button. It was one of those old style ones. And I remember I went to reach out to turn off the television, and a tiny ball, a tiny orb, a sphere of translucent golden light about the size of a ping pong ball, however big that is, appeared in front of me about 2 meters away towards the end of the bed. And it caught my attention immediately, and I can't remember if I actually ended up turning off the television or not. And as I looked at it, I had no sense of fear or apprehension or concern or anything. I was completely neutral at it, I suppose. And as with all the experiences that have been of a divine nature, and as I looked at it, it immediately came closer to me, and like as it came closer, it expanded in size exponentially, and it engulfed me. It's the only way I can talk about it. It got so big I was inside it for a second, and then I was gone. I don't know how to talk about that. It was like 1 minute I was sitting in my bed, 1 second, and then the next second I was in a formless place. I had no body. I was my pure awareness of myself. But in this place, it wasn't the formlessness of God. It wasn't the Godhead. It was a lesser vibratory experience. That's how I'm going to describe it, because I don't know how else to describe it. It was another state, another level, another realm, another dimension, another whatever. But I was aware of a circle around me. I couldn't see anything. I had no body eyes. I only had mind. So my awareness was mental awareness. And I was aware of a circle around me of beings. And my mind didn't flash back to the circle of chairs that I'd put out earlier that day. But looking in retrospect, it was much the same scenario. I was in the middle and they were all sitting around me. But they were kind of elevated. They were up. They didn't have any shape or form. I just knew mentally there were other minds in that room, place, whatever it was, wherever I was, around me. And I didn't get any sense of extreme love or anything. It was very clinical. It was very stale in a sense, very, very academic. That's how it would feel. It would feel like an academic setting. Anyway, I was focusing mentally, as mind, I was focusing mentally on the beings or the other minds that were present. And one of them sort of floated towards me. I don't know how to talk about that again. There are no words for these sorts of experiences, really. I'm struggling to try and express how things were for me, and I don't even know. But this other being came from the circle down beside me like that, as if like an old friend standing beside me, and took me around the circle, just slowly took me around the circle and allowed me to view and to see all of the beings that were sitting there in that circle. And there was a lot. There was much more than the 12 in the 12 chairs I put out. There would have been at least probably 50. I would say 30 to 50. It's a very rough guess. But as we went around, we got to a spot where I looked up and there was one chair missing. Not all one chair, one space missing, empty. And the voice of this being mentally explained to me, that's where your teacher Ted sits. And I was instantly given this sort of mental picturing of my teacher Ted, who was on Earth, incarnated on Earth, as my teacher in the healing center at Byron Bay. And that's where that experience ended. I woke up back in my bed. I think it was about 9:30 at night. And I immediately put on some clothes and raced up to the end of the compound, up to the end of the allotment there where the last cabin was, where Ted and his girlfriend Janelle lived. And I proceeded to tell him about the orb and what I'd done that day and what had just happened. And I was full of beans. Like you can imagine, it was like I had to tell him. It was just like so much to come out of me. And he was kind of very nonchalant about it, which I didn't really expect. I thought he'd be like, oh, cool. And then what happened? But he wasn't. He didn't have any there was nothing about it. And he just sort of looked at me and chuckled in his usual way. And he said, oh, you probably just got an assignment. And he told me that those orbs are filled with information. They're living information. And I didn't really know what he meant by that. He did do, I think the next day, he did a talk about orbs and stuff in the session. And but he said to me, I think you've probably just gotten an assignment. Right now, not really knowing what he meant by that, since then, up until recent years, in what would appear to be, to anyone else, I guess, spontaneous happenings, in spontaneous moments, in random, out-of-sequence moments that seem to just come in off the left stage, out of somewhere and into your life, information that I need to deal with the situation, which I could not possibly have known prior to the situation, just sort of came up in my mind, and things would happen and I would know that they were happening. There was this kind of clairvoyancy, perhaps, in the moment of maybe deja vu, and it was like an advanced knowing of things. There was an internal guidance with things that wasn't already part of my programming, part of my learning, part of whatever, and I can only attribute it to what he might have said about that being as part of my assignment and being given the information, or receiving the information that orb contained, which included, of course, the experience of meeting all of those beings who were answering my prayer for invitation to make themselves known to me, because I felt the presence of divine beings or higher level beings at work, at influence in my experience on earth here. And there were many experiences post-enlightenment that I don't know if I could say I was ever ready for any of them, but they, in one way or another, in one way or another, they always upsetted my apple cart, always offered me more than I was aware of at the time, and always put me into a new understanding of the nature of life, the universe, and everything through my own process of atonement, using the principles of A Course in Miracles, to the point where that understanding and application of principles is now reasonably automatic. I've been noticing in recent months and years, and this is a constant ongoing thing. There's always this kind of noticing of little subtle shifts and changes in the consciousness where you go, wow, I'm not like that anymore, or wow, that something's changed in that situation, that relationship. And there's this kind of purification, where the things that once would have attracted me out in the world, just don't even show up anymore. They're not a thing. And that goes across the board for everything, across all physical desire, all emotional longing, everything like that has been cleaned up to the point where now I'm whole and perfect. I don't know what I mean by that either, because the whole and perfect is as above, so below. It's always been the case, but the realization of it as being the case on earth is something that you would talk about as coming to know God's will. It's like learning God's will for me on earth is, God's will for me is perfect happiness, and I'm perfectly happy being in the world and not of it, and not having any kind of allegiance to the world, particularly in any way. There are things that I still participate in the world, as far as going to work and paying bills and things like that. And I do like to get on And I know there are going to be those conceptual minds that won't understand this because they're rooted in A Course in Miracles in their own transformation, trying to heal their own activity through this. But I like to throw a rock into the pond of stillness of my own mind by just to see if I react to the ripples coming back, but by making comments and interactions on social media and things. And in recent weeks, by inviting somebody in to share my living arrangements who's come from a very particularly upsetting arrangement of their own, and who is coming into my space bringing the dregs and the draggings of their own karma with them, and deliberately inviting them in for that purpose, knowing that if there is any kind of subtle denial in me attempting to hide, attempting to remain hidden, right? Never underestimate ego. Attempting to remain hidden, that it would be a good catalyst for bringing that out and exposing it. And it has been. There's been some beautiful moments there of letting go on my behalf, and initially perhaps regretting the choice that I made to invite those energies in, but knowing that everything works for the greater good and there are no coincidences and no circumstances wherein the will of God is not present. I'm proceeding to go through the particulars of that processing of whatever that brings up, and it's always going to be joyous. There's always going to be this kind of releasing and relief and all of that sort of stuff at the relinquishment of projection and judgment and all of those sorts of things. So it's not over till it's over, and there's always more. So I know a lot of people involved in spiritual work, and I call it work because it's more at times it's more work than my physical day job, but I know a lot of people like to seek seclusion for themselves and keep the world out there at bay because they sort of come to this realization that oh my God, I've got a limit. I see what's going on here now, and putting my finger on my nose, my own world is coming back into me. My own thoughts and ideas are returning home, and I have to allow them to return in defenselessly and accept atonement for myself in those places where the ripples of my own conscious association with the world still exist. And there's a lot of good spiritual minds that try to avoid that and try to push that away rather than to welcome it in and go through the speed up of their own purification process by doing that. So I'm very grateful for my brother who's come to stay, and I'm sure she's grateful for the space she has away from her particular old associations. And funnily enough, this is a great testimony how nothing happens by accident. I presented her the other day with one of the little 20-minute books that we give out, which is the extract of the reviews of the first 50 lessons of A Course in Miracles. And she said, oh my God, I've got this little book somewhere. I've been meaning to read it. So there's no there's no accidents and no mistakes. Everything is perfect and orchestrated by the divine will of God, and which is perfect happiness for everybody. But as with every decision and every choice, it has to be chosen for. It has to be a conscious and activated choice. You have to activate yourself. No one's going to come along and tell you what to do. You got to listen within. All right, well, that was experience number 7. I waffled on a bit there, but I was going to try and keep it short. But anyway, we're at the 24-minute mark or something. So I love you, and there's a few more to go that are more profound in my awareness, in my thing, and I want to get them down so they're like in a file, and put them for posterity as long as they're needed. there are still minds entering into this continuum to have the experience of the illumination of their own mind and the remembrance of God and whatever any mind that has experienced its true self can do in regard to making itself available and offering the certainty of its mind of the fact that there is no world is entirely helpful in helping to raise the vibration, even though initially it's not going to be understood as that way. It's going to be seen probably as a sacrifice. But once you start to realize what the world is, then it becomes a willing sacrifice and not really any sacrifice at all to live your life in a truly spiritual manner. I guess when I say truly spiritual, it's never really truly spiritual, but it's a coming to, it's an opening up to. I love you. Thanks for listening.